Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Series 7, Episode 11, The Crimson Horror. Or The Crimson Horror. I was trying to imitate the morgue person guy's voice, but I don't think I can imitate such a great voice. And I might mention him later. So, after the extremely disappointing and quite insultive to the fans journey to the centre of the TARDIS, and after Cold War was a bit of a disappointment, and Hyde kind of went a little bit, started off well, but also kind of went downhill later on, a little bit. After that, we need an episode, as I mentioned at the end of the Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS review. We need an episode to pick up the series again. And in my opinion, The Crimson Horror is that episode. This may be a controversial opinion, along with The Rings of Akaten, but I love The Crimson Horror. I think this is a fantastic Doctor Who story. This is exactly what Doctor Who should do. This is also probably the Paternoster Gang's best episode, even more than A Good Man Goes to War, perhaps. No, yes, it is. So yeah, this is exactly what Doctor Who Series 7 needed after the last 3 episodes, especially the last one. Also, fun fact, this is the 100th individual episode of the Revive series to be broadcast, although The Rings of Akaten was the 100th to be filmed and made. But yeah, this is the 100th episode of the Revive series. Well, individual episodes. Woo! Party time! And how do they celebrate this episode? With a pretty interesting story, and a pretty enjoyable one too. So the plot of this episode starts out with Madame Vastra being hired to investigate the Crimson Horror, which is a red flabby skin on people who have been dead people who have been found in the canals. And it's tying into this place called Sweetville, run by Mrs. Gillyflower, played by the wonderful late Dame Diana Rigg. And this review is dedicated to Dame Diana Rigg, who does a fantastic performance as our main villain of this story. She is absolutely fantastic. Better still, her real-life daughter, Rachel Sterling, plays Mrs. Gillyflower's daughter, Ada, who is one of our supporting allies of the story, along with Vastra, Jenny, and Strax, who are probably at their best in this story. So Vastra, Jenny, and Strax head up to Sweetville after taking a look at pictures featuring the final image of the eye, which has been captured in the with the people being having the Crimson Horror. The last image of what they see in their eyes are still there. Similarly, what we get in the Ark in Space, where when the Doctor is trying to find out what the Wirran's last things it saw when it came to the Ark was before it died. Although in that story we see the last couple of hours or a couple of minutes of that creature before it dies, whilst here it's just one last image. And they see that in the body of the brother of the person who hired them, and that brother was the one along with a young woman who were investigating Sweetville. In the image of the man, the brother of the guy who hires the Paternoster Gang, is the Doctor. So the Paternoster Gang head up to Sweetville to try and find the Doctor, as well as investigate what's going on. Jenny signs herself as a resident of Sweetville, whilst Vastra realizes that the red chemical stuff when she goes to the morgue guy is in fact a poison from the dawn of time that affected the drinking water for the Silurians. So she realizes this stuff has been coming from a parasite which has been around for 65 million years or so. Eventually, Jenny discovers the Doctor and sets him free. It turns out the Doctor had been saved by Ada, who was treating him as her monster, due to the fact that, like her, the Doctor is not a perfect specimen, but he is still yet alive, and Ada shows him some kindness as a way to keeping him as a pet. Ada has been blinded and beaten, supposedly by her own father in a drunken rage, as Mrs. Gillyflower makes a demonstration of. But as it turns out later, she was more of a guinea pig for Mrs. Gillyflower's experiments. So Ada is a bit of a tragic character, and thankfully she's a nice character. She, in the coming soon trailer of the Series 7, it was possibly hinting that she was going to be a villain, but it actually turns out she's a supportive ally in the story, and a tragic character that we want the Doctor to help. And it's thanks to her the Doctor manages to escape being thrown into the canals, and then Jenny is able to find him, and then he restores himself. Although him restoring himself with the sonic screwdriver and the vent, not really explained. In the same when he does it for Clara later on, it doesn't quite make an awful sense. But I'll look past that. Eventually, the Doctor and Jenny find Clara as well, who did not only survive the process, but she was not rejected. She was one of the ones who was fine, and then they revive her. And then Vastra and Strax come in to help save them when the supermodels come in to try and fight them off. As the Doctor says, attack of the supermodels. That was a funny line. And also Jenny has some pretty sweet moves when she's beating some of them up before Strax and Vastra come in to save the day. Like how Strax is kind of high on sugar when he comes in. He's overexcited. Eventually, the gang then try to stop Mrs. Gillyflower's plans of spreading the crimson goo across the world, where she plans to destroy the world, and then when it's revived, that then her perfect specimens will come out and have a much better world. So the gang have to try and stop her. The Doctor and Clara confront Mrs. Gillyflower whilst Vastra and Jenny remove the poison from the rocket. And it's revealed that Mrs. Gillyflower's partner, Mr. Sweet, is in fact a this red leech parasite creature that's symbiotically attached to Mrs. Gillyflower, and he likes sugar. He really likes sugar. There's a lot of sugar in this episode. Sweet and sugar. I guess this is just a sugary episode. Sweets for my sweets, sugar for my honey. Yeah, it's that kind of episode. It's just sweet. I mean, okay, the episode itself is not sweet, but it's got a lot of sugar stuff in it. And then Mrs. Gillyflower basically inadvertently reveals to Ada that Ada was the experiment, which causes Ada to flip out. But then Mrs. Gillyflower uses that as part of her escape plan and part to her advantage, basically, as she attempts to send up the rockets. Whilst Clara manages to destroy the machine, I believe is it Clara? Yeah. So whilst Clara is able to destroy the main machine, Mrs. Gillyflower has a backup. But thankfully, Vastra and Jenny have removed the poison, and Strax is able to cause Mrs. Gillyflower to fall down some stairs. She attempts to dodge his laser guns. And it's actually pretty interesting that she remains a villain to the end, as when Ada refuses to forgive her, she says, "That's my girl." Goes out on a smile, sort of, I guess. Even when Mr. Sweet leaves her. And then Ada basically brutally murders Mr. Sweet with her cane. I mean, it makes sense. So, yeah, that's basically the story. The very end sees the Doctor and Clara head off, although the Paternoster gang have not really much of don't really know how this Clara can exist after the events of the Snowmen, although Baz and Vastra has some sort of suspicions about it. That this Clara may be a different one to the previous one, and things are not all that they seem. By this point, the Doctor knows this Clara doesn't know anything about the other two, so the mystery is still yet to be solved for him. But he's kind of put somewhat at ease, I suppose, by the events of the last story. But yeah. Also, the guy who hired the Paternoster gang, he faints about 3 times in this story. It's a running gag throughout the story. At the start, and then a little bit later on, when he comes to check up on the progress, and then at the very end, where he makes one last appearance. It's pretty interesting. Also, I think some people may have complained about the Doctor giving a kiss to Ada and then somehow restores her blindness, and that's not really explained. But actually, from looking at that episode, I don't think he does fix her blindness. I think he just gives her a kiss. Also, if he had cured her blindness with a kiss, well, that's just as logical and makes as much sense as the 7th Doctor fixing Ace's broken leg in a deleted scene from Remembrance of the Daleks with just some special Time Lord powers. They're Time Lords. It would make sense, although that scene from Remembrance was cut. But like I said, I don't think the kiss here fixed the blindness. I think it was just a goodbye kiss on the cheek. And whilst I'm here, whilst I remember, when the Doctor and Clara when the Doctor's telling his story of him and Clara. It's told in a kind of like a Victorian film. We've got some Victorian music, style music, and also the running joke of the Morgue guy, the Crimson Horror, in that really cool voice. And I like in the third time round, the Doctor kind of has a bit of fun with the name, so the audience might think he's slightly mocking the guy for them if they're getting a bit bored of hearing the name from this guy several times. I think I'd probably be annoyed of the guy going the Crimson Horror three or so times in the episode if it wasn't for the fact that the guy has such a great voice and says it's such a great way, and he's actually quite a compelling character despite only having a few seconds on screen at a time. So yeah, I'm actually okay with it. And then as we see the Doctor's flashback and backstory, it's handled very well. Although I do have to mention at this one point, the guy that they team up with, which is the brother of the guy who goes to the Vastnoster gang, when he's shouting about the guys in the canal, that it's like some sort of conspiracy. Why won't anybody listen? Why are the police restraining him there? That's not really a moment for police to restrain a guy. He's like, oh, there's another in the canal. Why won't anybody listen to me? There's a conspiracy or something. And the police are restraining him for some reason. It's like, does Mark Gatiss have a thing for restraining people in this series? Because Cold War, he had some Russian soldiers restraining the Doctor on the bridge. But for that, at least in that episode, I can have the understanding that because the Doctor was an intruder and possibly an alien spy / saboteur in the eyes of the Russian soldiers, even though he was trying to help them at that point. But I can at least understand where they're coming from. But here, these police officers are just restraining a guy for literally no reason. But, that's only a nitpick of this story. There are only a few nitpicks I have for this story. I don't really think there's anything wrong with it, apart from a few niggles and issues. Oh, and the final scene, but that's not really a problem with the story itself. That's just so it can tie in with the next episode. I'll quickly talk about that. The ending sees Clara return home, where Angie and Artie from the Bells of St. John, which are the kids she's looking after, have found pictures of her on the Russian submarine from Cold War, at Carabas' house in Hyde, and Victorian Clara from the Snowmen. And that's where she accidentally let slip that she went to Victorian Yorkshire, and the kids now want to go time travelling, or they'll tell their dad that Clara is a time traveller. However, whilst this scene has potential to set up these characters as potentially good supporting characters in future episodes, next time, they turn out to be pretty boring. They turn out to be boring side characters. If this had happened a few episodes earlier, maybe we could have had another episode or two with these characters to have a bit more fun. But at the end of this episode, they're certainly more enthusiastic about travelling through time and space than they are in the next episode, where they actually get to go travelling in time and space. And then after that episode, they don't really appear again. They're not a cameo, mention in the name of the Doctor, but that's about it. They disappear after Series 7. So, yeah, what was the point? I'm not blaming Mark Gatiss, because he's got to tie it in with the next episode, or the script editors, or Stephen Moffat are tying it with the next episode. So I'm not really blaming Mark for that. Because, and like I said, if this happened earlier in the series, maybe we had another episode or two with Angie and Artie, with the Doctor and Clara travelling, maybe once or twice in the series, then it probably would have worked. And if the characters were more interesting, then yeah, it could have worked. But unfortunately, as it is, not so much. But I'm not blaming Mark for that. I'm not blaming Mark Gatiss for that, because it's a scene that's tying in with the next episode rather than this episode. So I'm not going to blame Mark Gatiss for that. Even if he wrote the scene, I'm not going to blame him for this, because it's not really his fault. Oh, and the Tom joke that we get, I honestly don't mind that. I don't really mind it. Maybe the character could have played a bit more role in the episode, actually, because he does stick around with Strax for a little bit, but he doesn't really do an awful lot else besides that joke. So it would have been fun, maybe at least hang out with Strax at the very end of the episode, perhaps. He's not really that needed, but I'm fine with his inclusion. Oh yeah, another niggle. Some people have said Series 7 Part 2 is when the Doctor gets a bit more sexually assaultive or something. The Doctor likes to sexually assault some people, or gets more sexually hands-on. But apart from, there is a bit where he snogs Jenny after waking up, but that's just after the process of restoring himself, so I can see why that was there, although it is a little bit of a questionable scene. Haven't seen anything else so far that implicates the Doctor sexually assaulting people. The closest we've gotten prior to this is just the way he greets people, like in from that we've seen in from the lodger. But even then, that's not really sexually assaultive. So not sure what people are talking about, apart from maybe in this episode, and also maybe that gag about Clara. I think was it at the very end? No, it's in the end of the next episode, I think. But yeah, but I did want to mention that one bit about the Doctor and Jenny in this episode because it was a little bit of a questionable bit. But you know what? I don't think there's much of a problem with it so far yet. Besides that, and maybe a mention in the next episode. But we'll see what the last two episodes have to say for themselves. And also, Clara is pretty dull in this episode. She's quite. She doesn't really do much, actually. She's not really there. She is the boss, but she doesn't really do anything to earn the title of being the boss. Not really. I mean, she's not completely pointless. She's all right, but maybe this episode could have worked as a Doctor-like story. Companion-like story. But since there's only 8 episodes of Clara in this series, we've got to make the most of her, I guess. But you know, she's not totally pointless. She's got some moments there, like when she realizes it's the chimney that they need to go to which turns out to be what the rocket's being fired out of. So she's not completely pointless, but she's probably a bit dull. I actually kind of like her more here than she was in Jenny to the Centre of the TARDIS, probably because she doesn't do as much. But yeah, this is probably her least to do in the series, although Journey was her most boring. So props to that. But okay, overall, despite a few nitpicks, The Crimson Horror is a brilliant story. It's a brilliant episode. It's great to see the Paternoster gang again, doing the Paternoster gang stuff, and it's also great to have a bit more focus on Jenny in the first third of the episode. She really gets to come into her own here, doing her own stuff. And we got some actual funny gags with Strax this time around. It's not actually forced. I think the Tom John joke is probably the most forced, but that's not with Strax. I mean, he's there in the scene, but he's not the one saying the joke. And there's some good Vastra stuff as well, as she's the one who recognises the goo from 65 million years earlier. And yeah, I think these guys are handled really well in this story. Mark Gatiss gets the Paternoster gang, and it's probably their best outing. Doctor's brilliant. Clara could have been a bit better, but she's more interesting than in the last story. So yeah, Mrs. Gilliflower, fantastic villain. Dinah Rigg does a fantastic performance, as does Rachel Sterling as Ada. And we've got some fun side characters as well throughout the episode. So overall, I will be giving The Crimson Horror a well-deserved 10 out of 10. That's right, I'm going there. I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. Yeah, there are a few points that could have knocked it down to a 9, but I really enjoyed this one. I really liked this one. I thought it was a great, entertaining episode, and had some real great moments. I think I might put this one slightly over Rings of Akaten, because whilst Rings of Akaten have less nitpicks, I think said nitpicks are slightly bigger to the story, contribution to the story, rather than the nitpicks in this episode. I think it's kind of between the two of them. I think the slight edge is going to this one, just a slight edge. But I think these two controversial episodes are brilliant. I mean, they're not the best the new series has to offer. Well, actually, that's sort of a lie, because they are 10 out of 10s, but they're not the very best. They're just the best. Well, 2 of the best, I should say. So yeah, Series 7's got 2 10 out of 10s so far. Who'd have thought? I was actually kind of worried that I wouldn't even get 1, let alone 2, in this series before rewatching them. But heaven behold, I got 2, and it's the 2 that were the 100th episode. First in the earlier one, the 100th episode made of the revived series, and this one, the 100th broadcast of the revived series. Woo! Time to party, I guess, everyone, because we've got a 10 out of 10 100th episode. Well, 2, actually, if we're going in terms of production. Let's party! Woo, 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 woo! So, that's it from my review of The Crimson Horror. Thank you for watching. Next time, Neil Gaiman will be writing another Doctor Who story, and it will be featuring the Cybermen, and it'll feature a brand new Cyberman design. There's a lot to look forward to, and you've got Angie to play with. Maybe Neil Gaiman could do something with them after this episode teased that. They'd be travelling for an adventure. Who knows? Let's see what Nightmare in Silver tunes out for us. Although I did hear that it was rewritten by another person, so it's not Neil Gaiman's final script. A bit like how Destiny of the Daleks was completely written by Douglas Adams and not Terry Nation's original scripts. And there's been quite a few other examples as well. Do we have something to worry about next time? Oh, please, God, no. No, please, come on. It's Neil Gaiman. You can't do that to Neil Gaiman. And the Cybermen, they've already been badly treated in the last series. Come on, guys. And Andy Narty at least did show some potential at the end of this last thing. Come on, guys. Come on. Oh, well, whatever happens, we'll find out next time in Nightmare in Silver. See you guys then. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Bloody burps. Run by a Mrs. Ada's the daughter, who's run by a Mrs. Gilliflower, played by the late Diane. Run by Mrs. Gilliflower, which is run by the late, run by Mrs. Galliflower. Whilst Vastra and Strax attempt to well, Vastra and Strax don't really do an awful lot of investigating, but Vastra does. So he could be mocking the guys. I honestly like it. I like. Overall, the Crimson Horror is. So overall, the Crimson Horror, this is a fun, enjoyable, engaging story that's really well put together. There's a few niggles and nitpicks I have with this story. And we got some good stuff about Vastra and overall, the Crimson Horror is the best episode of, and maybe Angianati actually. Next time's Nightmare in Silver. Let's see how that goes. Oh well, we'll find out what happens next time with